Carbon is the elemental building block of life on Earth, yet the ever-increasing amount of carbon emissions from humans now threatens all life on this planet. We have talked extensively about our role in producing carbon emissions, but in today's preview, we will explore some fascinating and imaginative ways we can use carbon to keep ourselves clean. Hello, I am your host, Mike Lake, and I am excited to talk with Jaeson Cardiff about his company, Clean O2 Carbon Capture Technologies, which not only captures carbon from the environment, but has found ways to transform it to useful products that might surprise you.
Innovation, resiliency, discovery. Join Mike Lake, President and CEO of Leading Cities, as we explore the technologies shaping the possibilities of our future with a preview of tomorrow.
Hello and welcome, Jaeson. Thank you so much for joining us today. And once again, I do want to welcome all of our listeners and viewers for joining us. I wanted to introduce you to Jaeson Cardiff. He is the CEO of Clean O2 Carbon Capture Technologies. This is a company that is leading in microscale carbon capture. And it also has some world-class personal care products made with recycled carbon. So, Jaeson, before we get into, the products, the problem, I would love to know a little bit more about yourself and perhaps how you even got into this field.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. I appreciate having me on your podcast. My background is in plumbing and heating. I'm a commercial Red Seal plumber and gas fitter here in Canada, and I spent over 20 years working in commercial mechanical rooms, specifically on natural gas-fired heating appliances. So I spent probably more time than I should in a very dry, darkened room with lots of gas-fired appliances.
Well, I guess in many ways that might explain how carbon emissions became something on your radar screen.
Yeah, absolutely. I recall, so that all of this started back in 2005, and I think the catalyst was an announcement made. I think it was the Obama administration that had come out and said something along the lines of that the government was going to be funding initiatives and innovations in reducing carbon emissions from various industries. And I took special note just because I work very closely with natural gas appliances, which obviously is a source of greenhouse gas emissions. But what was odd was that the majority of those topics, those key points that the administration was focused on was the energy sector and the transportation industry, but they weren't really looking at these smaller aggregated sources of greenhouse gas emissions.
Smaller ones, like, give us a few examples.
So think of all of the things that provide us comfort, like your boilers, your hot water tanks, your furnaces, any small application that uses natural gas to provide heat or comfort or warmth or hot showers, those sort of things. In the U.S., roughly 12% of the U.S. emissions come from these little aggregated sources of greenhouse gases.
So before we really dive too deep, I do want to just set a little bit of a foundation here for our listeners and viewers, because carbon emissions are a guarantee, right? They're going to happen. There's really two approaches that we as humans need to really start thinking more about and doing more about. One is about reducing the amount of emissions. The other is about dealing with the emissions that we do have and the sequestration of those emissions. Do you mind speaking a little bit just so we can kind of start off on understanding the difference between those two?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, we need to do everything we can to reduce emissions. The problem is time, right? It's the time frame that we have to deal with. When we talk about reducing emissions, it's portrayed to the public that we can just go and turn off a switch and the problem is then resolved. And we fail to take into account how integrated our society has become and reliant we've become on the use of natural gas for creating heat and warmth, especially in the northern climates where it can get quite cold. It's an affordable fuel. It's the infrastructure is already in place, but we need to address those emissions. But we can't wait for those emissions to have some sort of a transitional phase where we maybe move into hydrogen or we electrify some of our heating grid. We need to start addressing these emissions today. So that's where we're sort of focused on is saying, okay, well, look, the map forward is transitioning into a more sustainable energy source. But for now, we have this established energy source that we need to start addressing today. So there's kind of I think a disconnect in understanding of not necessarily that we need to move into something else, but the time frame to get there seems to be lost in the public forums that I enjoy spending much time with.
So, I mean, obviously with leading cities, we work a lot with cities and just about any city in the world, although it probably flips between which takes the top spot and which is in the second spot, but it's always comes down to vehicles and buildings as the major, carbon emitters. When we talk about that, I mean, what opportunity or what fear perhaps do you have in the way society is going today and what that means for the planet in the long term?
Well, the building sector is a very interesting area in terms of carbon emissions. Historically, the heating industry has been terribly slow. I often point to examples of looking at boilers that were installed in the 1920s and compare them to boilers that are being installed today. And really, there isn't that much different. So the advancement of heating technologies have changed, but at a very slow pace. So I think the concern that I have is that level of adoption, that willingness to acknowledge that there's a problem and a want to try to find solutions. And the key factor here in every case, from a building perspective, is the operating expenditures, the economics, right? It has to make economic sense first. It's the reality. Environmental concerns obviously should be at the forefront, but that's not the world that we live in today. So when I'm talking to customers about, improving their ESG portfolio, reducing carbon emissions, the very first thing is always, what's it going to cost me? And if that number isn't really approachable, well, then you've wasted your time. So that's something that that still concerns me, of recognizing it's urgent for us to be able to push the envelope and hasten the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, but historically it moves really slow.
So I want to get now into the work that you're doing because, as I said, we have to deal with this issue, and you are dealing with it. So tell us a little bit more about Clean O2.
Sure. So Clean O2 has created a technology. We actually commercialized it in 2017. We're just going through some regulatory hurdles now and some code approval processes that were, I think, to be complete next week.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, what a journey that has been. We can save that for another time. So our technology is designed to interface with natural gas-fired heating appliances. So we extract a portion of the flue gas from a natural gas-fired heating appliance. We plug it into our technology. It's called a CarbonX unit. It's about the size of 2 residential refrigerators stacked back to back. We pull in the flue gas. It has the CO2 component in it. We have hydroxides, potassium hydroxide in our reaction chamber, so that absorbs the CO2. When that happens, it gets hot. It's an exothermic reaction. So we take the waste heat from that appliance, we combine it with the exothermic heat of the chemistry, and then we use that energy, that stored energy, to help offset the energy demands for the building. And that's where the majority of our carbon offsets come from, is actually from the heat recovery component. The most attractive part and the really interesting part for me is that actual direct capture, because once that process is complete and that chemical has been spent, we have a higher value chemical that we can extract and then use in products. So one of the things we also want to incorporate is the circular economy piece. So instead of instead of trucking this off and turning it into soap and other products and shipping that all over the country, we keep it local. In some cases, we can even keep it within the same building. One of our customers is a hotel, for example. So we can extract their CO2. We can convert it into this chemical that's used in the soap and detergent industry. We can keep it within that city and then bring it back to that hotel to be used to clean their surfaces, provide these beautiful little soap body bars for their hotel guests. We can use it for laundry. We can use all of these things. So not only are we reducing emissions, but we're also creating a circular economy within the building.
Which is amazing. Give us a sense. So when we're talking about the heat transfer and offsetting some of that energy, can you give me a sense of just how much energy you're offsetting? Look, I'm already taking credit for it.
Well done, Michael. Yeah. So the benchmark we've been able to hit right now is about 20%. So on average, it's about 20%. Now we have a limited number of units out in the field. We've got I think we've got 13 units here in Calgary, or in Canada rather, and then I think we've got 10 units that are going into Minneapolis and 4 units in Tokyo. So our data sets are quite small, but right now the average seems to be about a 20% reduction in energy demands. But so we're releasing a new version 4 next year that should be able to hit somewhere around the 40 to 50% reduction in energy and carbon emissions. But our long-term goal, our ultimate goal, is to get to 100%, right? It's never enough until we hit 100%. So we're constantly taking the money that we make from the products that we sell and reinvesting it back into the company to further our research and development efforts so that we can get to that 100% mark.
And for a moment, let's talk about those products. So these are basic consumer goods. Can anybody buy them?
Sure can. Yeah, absolutely. For the longest time, we were just an e-commerce platform. So you could go onto our website, cleano2.ca. You could buy yourself some wonderful body bars. We have a formulator. Michelle Regal is our director of innovation and design. She makes wonderful products, everything from a coffee and honey body bar to a spearmint and clay body bar. We have some liquid body wash.
You're making me hungry.
Yeah.
Those all sound delicious.
We have car wash detergent. We have laundry detergent. We have all sorts of products. And now, most recently, we've started to break into some major retail chains like Safeway. In Canada, here we have like IGA, Canadian Tire. I don't know if you're familiar with Canadian Tire, but it's a big national brand here. We're looking at getting into places like, potentially places like Trader Joe's and Bath and Body Works and all these other large retailers that are already selling these products would be a great fit because we're price point, we're right in that sweet zone in terms of cost. So yeah, those are kind of our avenues that we're pursuing now.
So when you project out, consumer demand, let's say, and you then kind of overlay that with the actual amount of carbon that's being sequestered, do you have projections on the targets there?
Yeah, I mean it really is a massive industry. I mean the soap and detergent industry in the U.S. alone is a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. They consume massive quantities of this chemical. I don't have the exact numbers with me, but sure. I mean, you just think of any one building and think of how many, the population of the U.S. and every one of them at one point in time is going to wash their hands just today, at least once, right? Or at least you would hope. Most people are going to wash their hands at least once. So then you put that on a global scale and map that out. It truly is a massive industry because it's not just personal care. It's, as I said, it's laundry. It's other industries for the detergent industry. But we're also looking at adopting our technology to be a provider for the ag sector as well. So potassium carbonate that we're producing is a feedstock for the agricultural, and that's even a much larger industry. So in terms of capture, and there's one thing we have to worry about, right? If we have all of these buildings and we're capturing all of this carbon, we're producing all of this carbonate, and we don't want to drown in a pile of white powder from these units. We have to have a place for it, and the industries that we're tapping into are really quite massive.
That's amazing. I will say, when you talked about the size of the soap and detergent industry here in the U.S., we have a toddler at home. I think we might be responsible for a good portion of that entire industry. But
Nice.
I do want to. I can't believe our time is almost up. But I do want to like project out a little bit, 10, 15, 20, 50 years, whatever it is. Tell me, let's assume now that, Clean O2, both the carbon capture solution as well as the consumer products are everywhere. What do you see as that impact for the individual or for the planet?
Well, it comes down to asking the question, are carbon emissions going to go away in 20, 30 years? Are the issues with carbon emissions going to end in like 3 decades? And I think the answer very clearly is no. Natural gas industry is going to maintain a position as a primary energy provider for many decades to come. Although granted, it will slowly, I think we're going to see probably an adoption into the hydrogen economy. I think that's going to likely be it's an excellent point source combustion for heating. But I think it's going to take a while to get there. So if we're talking 20, 30 years out, I can see Clean O2 as a national brand provider. We can have the Clean O2 Inside story, much as Intel did with chipsets. We could have Clean O2 Inside as a quality provider to improve the quality of the goods that we're attached to. And we have a map to get to that 100% that involves a few step changes for our current technology. So I think we'll be a major player in this marketplace.
Well, you clearly have a range of customers that can be talking to you and learning more. So tell us, how does any of us get to contact or learn more about what you're doing?
Sure. The easiest way is just to reach out through our website. We have just a soap at cleano2.ca. If you're interested in learning more about our technology, send us an email. And of course, for anybody listening to Excelicities, we are on all of the open channels within this platform, which has been fantastic to make connections with all sorts of wonderful people. So yeah, those are probably the 2 best ways to get a hold of us.
Fabulous. Well, Jaeson, I thank you for the time today, but more importantly, I want to thank you for the work you're doing and its impact on a global scale, and especially looking out to the future. So thank you so much for joining us at Preview of Tomorrow.
Thanks, Michael. Really appreciate your time.
And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Preview of Tomorrow. Listeners like you are essential to advancing our efforts to drive resiliency and sustainability for all. I ask that you give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or whichever streaming platform you prefer. Your feedback helps us to grow and share these brief previews of what life in the future can be. In addition to thanking our guest today, I want to thank Peter Roy and Demetria Bridges for making this podcast possible. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and encourage others to also join us each week in previewing the possibilities of tomorrow.
Preview of Tomorrow is brought to you by Leading Cities, a global nonprofit driving resilience and sustainability for all by unleashing the potential of the world's cities. Join them at leadingcities.org.